I'm going to be giving a talk today. And like I normally kind of hold back before going too deep into concepts, into theories, because you need to kind of walk the path in order to land into the house of inner dance, the inner dance that's kind of like a room called consciousness that's within. The purpose of going into the understanding of inner dance has many folds, has many reasons. Partly, like, what do you say when you start to hold a space, right? Like, do you just list down, okay, these are the things that I'm going to say again and again, over and over again? There's a lack of authenticity and integrity with just being told what to say, or just telling yourself, okay, I'm just going to keep saying this. That doesn't really work in the sense that words aren't meant to be empty shells. The reason for knowing what to say has something to do with what is the understanding that you bring people into. What's the paradigm? What's the worldview that you initiate people into? And this is kind of tricky because the energy is kind of hard to put into words. Words help to define and to reduce and to make simple that which is really, really deep. And as you know, the energy is not simple. It's not reductive. It's not fragmentary. It's huge. The energy is huge. So the ritual of introducing people in the space is oxymoronic and quite paradoxical in a way that you're always going to be trying to contextualize something huge and describing something big that normally isn't reducible. So the more you keep at it, the more you keep indoctrinating yourself into the energy, which is kind of eternal and infinite, the more you bring yourself into a kind of philosophy. You're not just here to act as a guide or as a healer, but you become a kind of philosopher. A philosopher deals with wisdom. A philosopher deals with structure, systems. A philosopher deals with knowledge, understanding. Philo means love, and Sophie means wisdom. So philosophy deals with questions, deep and essential questions, questions such as what is there, what exists, what is time, what is the universe, what is consciousness, what is the self. So you would find yourself speaking about these really deep concepts, which for sure you are interested in, which for sure you've been interested in as a child, as an adult. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be in this room. You wouldn't be in this inquiry if you weren't interested in what am I doing here? What am I? Why did I choose my name, my body, this particular version of existence? Why do things happen the way they do? So it's pretty easy to push these questions away. A lot of guides, a lot of teachers would rather, okay, stop thinking, don't think, just let go, surrender. But you can only keep doing that for so long. And the more you do your work well, people would actually start to ask these questions. So there has to be the beginning of a philosophy in many regards in the spiritual journey, in the spiritual awakening. So a lot of people are shopping around what is the philosophy that would work. There could be philosophies that are maybe culturally biased, philosophies that belong to particular geographies and histories that would satiate a person because it would work for them. But philosophy deals with timeless questions. They're not bound by specific words. Like a lot of Westerners, for example, they're very interested in Sanskritizing a lot of things, primarily because yoga had been quite huge, and Indian, South Asian mysticism or spiritual practice has been quite popular the last century. But we cannot always just rely on specific terms, specific concepts that are more or less, like a few hundreds or thousands of years old. Some people are okay with that. Okay, like I'm studying this teacher who studied with this teacher who was alive a couple of decades ago, century ago, and they said this, so this should be true because someone said that this is true, and someone said that this is true. A lot of us probably won't be satisfied just with that. He said, she said, he said. Truth can be, linear and passed on through a lineage in that way, where, the great grandmother learned this from, their ancestors. That doesn't work in a way that truth changes over time and changes over space. And you only need to keep going into this long enough to realize that I'm interested in a truth that's not going to change, that's not going to keep changing as I shop around from truth to truth. What is actually true truth? We trust truth when we see it. We resonate with it when it comes up in the space. Something in our bodies and our minds can resonate that, okay, this one seems to encompass many truths, inclusive truth, not just controlled, filtered truth according to what he thinks or what is more practical, that makes more money, that brings more pleasure, that isn't that, So I think we do want to uncover something more objective and universal. What does energy have to say? Particularly, where does inner dance fit in to all this? So we delve into this over the next month, over the next weeks, without giving up practice and theory. Philosophy guides theory that brings about effective practice. You cannot practice well without effective theories, but you cannot arrive at theories without actual philosophy. This has been the journey of man arriving at how to organize a world that's also systems based. I shared an audio earlier today. I would wonder if you had the time to listen to it. It's really, really short. And it doesn't matter if you did or did not have time to listen to it. I'm happy to listen to it with you again today as we take notes. I appreciate this particular one. It happened a long time ago, maybe in 2013, which is roughly maybe 10 years ago, more or less. It tells something. It's not just basically what was in the audio that is striking. It's basically what was happening in inner dance when the event struck, like what happened 10 years ago. This was in a living room in a condominium in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And this happened with one of the most powerful lawyers in this Southeast Asian country that I just mentioned. I've played this audio over so many trainings since it came up, and it's led to quite a lot of conversations, and maybe we can open up the space for this conversation, and we can have a conversation later about what this might bring up in you. The audio probably brings up a lot more questions and answers, but it probably brings up possible answers as well to certain questions that have been there. So if you don't mind, let's listen to it.
It was so clear that I'm not the mind, neither am I the body.
Yeah. So what you did was you disentangled or detached or disassociated consciousness from its identification.
Yeah.
And so it suddenly became two parts, that which was watching, that which was being watched.
It's so amazing because it was neither the mind nor the body, and yet it's as though the self was in the experience and yet it knew that it was not it.
So this happened because it was spoken to and because it was not expecting anything, it actually heard it. And because it heard it, it became it. So I was speaking to it in a very direct way. And because that was the one that was listening, it took over the other system.
That's paradoxical.
Mm-hmm.
It's as though when you give a voice to the ego, because the ego was talking, I need to sit with that for a while.
So right now you're still both of them. You're still speaking from it.
Yeah.
There's still the awareness of both of you integrating, because now you're sensing your structure. But everything that is ever said holds your space every day. You enter the room, you are held by the room. But because you are the room.
But I was not aware that I am the room. I never allowed myself to experience the room. The room never experienced itself. I'm trying to make sense of this, but it was so phenomenal to see the workings of the mind. My God.
Welcome to the actual structure of the true meditation. It has nothing to do with emptying.
No.
Never. Everyone's actually been doing the opposite. This is meditation.
Yeah, this is true meditation. Yeah. This is the absolute truth.
This is the true yoga. When you look at the movement.
This is the yoga.
Yeah, they approach it through form that they hope they would flow. But when flow awakens from within, now you see the relationship between the movement and the thought.
Yeah, I help me to understand it, because I caught it so many times that the movement preceded the thought.
And so thought is actually slower than the movement, because who is the movement?
The initiator of the movement is the thought. But
no, but why does the thought why does the thought come before? No, why does the movement
Why does the movement
come before the thought? Because the thought is the expression of the movement. And so the movement is an expression of something that comes before the movement. The body is an expression of the heart.
Yeah.
Because the movement is non-verbal. It is a higher expression compared to the words.
Okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
It's the intention.
Yeah, the energy.
Yeah.
It's the curiosity of consciousness that's always dancing, evolving, moving.
Because if all thoughts are energy,
Mm.
the energy is always moving because it's the intention to move, which is translated to the thought that I want to move. But actually, the intention already initiated the movement of all things.
It's the system, original system, that became curious of itself.
And Pi, now I cannot hear you. So maybe there's something about the voice.
Yeah, okay. So I don't think I need to change the settings after this. Thank you for the feedback. It's hard to monitor. Like my computer is a little bit complex. So it takes a while to decipher, but there's a lot of things brought up by this lady Ash in her experience that doesn't just outline inner dance from the question, what is it? What is there? It outlines a whole philosophy. There's a whole philosophy there. There's so many key points there, like actual terms within the philosophies. Some of the more important ones that comes up. And these concepts aren't easy to bring up. It's not easy to navigate. And so there needs to be something that's able to hold the gist or the big picture enough that we can traverse many of the layers, many of the concepts that, in fact, even for philosophers are very, very difficult to hold. So inner dance is a philosophy. Philosophy is love for wisdom. It's also the structure of wisdom itself. So we attempt today to see if we can tackle some of these deep elements with the thought that over your long period of holding space, becoming the space, leading people into the space, you would you would be touched at least by what the inner dance can contribute to. What do you initiate people into? How do you indoctrinate people into the much larger room? So to speak about the story of this incident helps. What was there? What's the point? What's important? Not just in what's being talked about, but what brings about the conversation itself. Ash is a really good friend of mine. Like over the years, I've known her for a long time. She's helped Maya and the inner dance process hugely. And one of the biggest reasons why I appreciate her as a friend, as a someone who attends inner dance, someone I've learned a lot from, is she's probably the most trusting person I know. You would want to collect people like her. Like, do you have people around you who trust? They would help you a lot. When you're held by trust, you're seen. And when there's not a lot of trust happening around you, there's not a lot of seeing. How much do you trust? Have you gone into trust so much that everything happens for a reason. Everything's connected and nothing is separate. There's no doubt, you know? How much are you in that? And how much are you surrounded by people in trust? It is not easy to hold inner dance without that energy. It's the one thing that holds the space. If I could rename the energy, that could be one of the names. Simply, you know, its name is trust. So Ash is one of the most trusting people I know, and every time she shows up, I've been to Kuala Lumpur maybe 35 times. I've done maybe 35 trips to Malaysia, because that's one of the powerhouses inner dance was in its first years. So much inner dance happening there. So yeah, that one night she said, okay, I'm processing something, Pai. I need to go through something. So I did a one-on-one, a private session in her apartment. As soon as I turned the music on, something interesting happened. And this is very self-defining for inner dance. As soon as I turned on the music, I found myself speaking, using words, you know, speaking, making sounds with my mouth, my person. And there's something powerful in the way I was speaking that day. It almost felt like I wasn't speaking as me. And later, Ash described it to me. She said, "Oh my gosh, what did you do? What, Pai? Like, what happened?" And imagine this. What if you were in a situation where the moment you want to speak, instead of the sounds coming out of your mouth, what if they came out of the person you're with? Okay, like, okay, I want to say something. I want to say something, but the moment you try to say it, then the other person would say it. And everything that you would think about every time you try to word it, someone else would say it. So that's what happened. When she said, "You became the voice of my ego," she said that, like, when the ego finds a voice elsewhere, when you became the voice of my ego, that's what she meant. And when that happened, as if the external and the internal totally became one, the difference, the space between the internal and external, it totally collapsed. When I was wording everything that she was trying to say, there was no other choice but for her to totally become the energy, become the universe, like Maya, the world of illusion. Like it just totally crashed in the first seconds, because like the outer world was expressing everything that was inside. So I guess you can surmise this must be about retrocausality. You're right. This has something to do with time becoming backwards rather than forwards. You're right. In fact, the first question that I asked almost kind of did it. And this is a question that I used to ask and still do when I hold space. Not a lot of people ask this because it doesn't make sense to ask it, but I ask it, and it's not just me asking, it's the energy asking it. The question is, what is time? If you listen to this audio when we first started Inner Intensive and I shared this, you probably heard how the conversation began. Like it began there. We were talking about when the question was first asked, what is time? And then she came into this reality where there was no time. I don't know if you should ask this or why you should ask this in the spaces that you hold. You would only really ask it if you truly asked it of yourself. For me, the inner dance as a workshop, as an experience, is actually a question: and what is time? And the answer Ash received was, there's no time. That is true, but there is also time. There is a place where no time exists, but there is a place where time is, which is where we're at now. But that's where she went. She went into a place where there was no time. And she suddenly felt like she was inside her own universe. Like when she went inside her, boom, she just went in. She just realized I'm a universe, and I'm inside myself, and I can see inside my brain, I can see inside my body. And one of the things she said was, I'm not my body, I am not my mind. Okay, to go straight to the point, were we to look at this map, what are the more salient, cogent, what are the more important, sorry, let me get rid of this Zoom stuff. There's always these Zoom things in the screen. You don't see it, but I see it. What are these key points that were taken up, and what's the most salient? For me, the most salient would be the most profound concepts that were brought up would be this one. You know, a lot of these could be generalizable, like neither am I the mind or the body. Became the voice of the ego, that's important. People approach spirituality either through form or flow. That's interesting. You know, form is modality. What do I do? As opposed to what do I not do? That actually brings about an awareness of this. These are important. We'll bring it up later on. But this is the most salient. This is the most interesting. She talked about how suddenly the movements come before the thought. Okay, so this is maybe something you've experienced. We can have a dialogue about this. When the body begins to move in a certain way, what happens to thought? People aren't always aware of that, but in this particular experience with Ash, there was an awareness that the movements precede the thought. And this could be relatable to this concept about the inside and the outside. So usually the inside could influence the outside. So maybe you have a thought and then you would move your body in accordance to the instructions given by the thought. But sometimes that could be the opposite, where something happens in the world and then you would react inside you. But in terms of causality, we normally experience thought coming before the movement. In retrocausality and inner dance, how it happens is something happens outside and then the thought comes after. Wait, I'm trying, it's difficult. I'm trying to explain it. One of the usual sharings that's striking in workshops for me is when I end up saying something, when I end up putting something in words, people are shocked, basically, because they, you know, very often they were already seeing something inside that was an image, that was a story, and then when I speak it, it's almost like something affirms what was already happening inside. But when Ash experienced this, the way she was describing it, there was this almost equal relationality between what I was saying and what she was thinking. Okay, so when you speak, just like I'm speaking now, when you speak, is there like a delay between the thought and the words? For me, when I'm speaking now, I'm speaking exactly as I'm thinking. Okay, so spoken word is basically like, in a way, thinking out loud. I'm expressing my truth through my sound. And the moment I make the sound, I'm actually thinking it exactly at the same time. There's no delay. Nothing's happening in advance or nothing's happening in delay. But nonetheless, there's something about the movement that is going to be coming before thought itself. Okay. When I first experienced this is after my spiritual mystical process in the mountains in California with the Mexican stranger. Talked about this. I went back to my home in the Philippines, in Manila, and I was in a psychedelic experience. I was in magic mushrooms on a spiritual vision quest with my friends. And this is basically maybe the first time I experienced the inner dance as a movement. So what happened, and maybe I talked about this before, but let's talk about this now. What happened was when my body was dancing, there was this powerful dance that's tribal and super strong. My body would move, and then there would be this awareness that I knew what was about to happen. Everything that was about to happen. I knew what someone was going to say. I knew what was going to happen in the music. It was like I went forwards in time, and time itself went backwards. So what I'm describing is very much what happens in inner dance. Like I've been listening to all these experiences people have had over years, 16 years, maybe even 17 years of listening to people going into inner dance. When I would listen to them, this is what they would describe. I felt like I knew what was going to happen before it happened. People talk a lot about images. They talk a lot about the feelings, emotions, they cried, memories, and so on and so forth. A lot of those are phenomenon, but structurally speaking, if there was structure, if there was a system in place, this would be it. Like I knew something I did not know before knowing it. It was like I already knew it before I even experienced it. And experience is a kind of knowing. So inner dance is that consciousness, is that knowing. That is huge. Philosophically, that turns a lot around. It inverts the whole of Western philosophical system itself, like science is based upon an awareness of thought, where thought comes prior to everything, to anything, that's called Cartesian philosophy, and that has opened up the system for how Western scientists and philosophers think. So something's happening in inner dance is actually the very opposite of how we understand the structure. So you could call it trust, you could call it intuition, but systemically, it's actually the very inversion of how we understand the world. So when Ash talks about this in a way that's like in the sense of wonder and awe and even shock, she's trying to word it. She's able to word some of it because some actual terms come out. Like when she talks about intention isn't just how we understand intention. Intention is in philosophy called intentionality, and it's one of the deepest questions and insights in philosophy itself. Intentionality is the most irreducible part of the universe. It's that which gives lumen or quality to consciousness. Like consciousness is nothing without intention. And there's actually something called phenomenal intentionality. That's also quite deep. I don't want to go into that first. I just want to describe what this energy is. It's this dimension that I describe now, where you know something you don't know, and that guides you, that allows you to speak from the heart, that allows you to move your body according to what has more spirit, what has more vision, what holds more meaning. And your body knows when you're there and when you're not there. So this has something to do with time. Time, what is time? Time holds a kind of structure that allows you to go your way every day. And if you change the awareness and the system and the structure of time, everything changes. Inner dance is that experience, and that's what Ash was trying to describe. For her, it was not a workshop. This is not a workshop. We always made jokes about that. This is a workshop. This is a session. She said, no, this is the nature of who we are. This is us. This is what we are. So if you change the nature of time, that's where you go. That's where we're going. So we use that as an opening, as a doorway to go into the room. What is time? Is time the same now as it has always been? Our awareness of time is based on our perception of it. Our experience of the universe is based on our time perception. Let's just take notes. Let's take notes here to help us to hold these. Start another screen. Okay, so time perception is a philosophy and a science. You know, you could hear something. There could be a vibration. There could be a word. There could be something you eat, something you drink, and suddenly time changes. So when you lay down, when you close your eyes, your time perception shifts. And when the body moves in a certain way, time perception shifts. There are different ways you can use music or sound. Music especially has the power of altering like time perception. I want to step back hugely in talking about this. Like, what is the time perception of humans? I'm reading your notes. Yes, exactly. And there's so many aspects of this. This is what made Albert Einstein supposedly the smartest man on Earth. He came up with this theory of relativity, which is about time perception, basically. That all you have to do is change the speed, and all of a sudden, time and space go through a warp, and a week here wouldn't be the same as in Saturn if you were in a spaceship. So time is relative, and it's kind of mystical if you think about it that way. He totally reshaped reality based on how we see it. Okay, so I don't want to lose my train of thought. Time perception has been changing throughout the world over our time here. This is important. How did we perceive time 10 years or 20 years ago? How did you experience time when you were a young girl, young boy? How do you remember time? Was it just you being young, or was it distinctly different before laptops, cell phones, the internet, and then before television, before radio, before writing, before speaking words. What did time look like? Would you be interested in that? Because this is somewhat what we are visiting. That's close to what time perception tries to study. That there are these different dimensionalities, and when historians and many scientists look at this, this isn't often regarded. We often think that the brain is static. It's been like that. It was the same, over the centuries, over the millennia. So often I read the messages people send me these days, including in this group in the inner intensive, and oftentimes people say, I feel like my brain is changing. My brain is going through a transformation. It's something's happening to my brain, Pi. I don't know what it is, but my brain's changing. Like yeah, what do you mean, right? Like how is your brain changing? So a big part of what's changing has to do with your awareness of how you hold yourself in time. So if you feel like things are faster, yet something slowed down now, that's kind of part of it. A big feature of that would be, how much are you able to handle now, like right now, compared to last week or last year, and then many years ago? How much feedback are you able to hold? How many tasks are you able to manage that used to take a lot more time? Like how much are you able to do today that used to take like a lot more before? How are you able to multitask in a way? You had to alter something for you to be able to do this. You can't just do that. You need to alter the container or the system for you to manage as much feedback as you're managing now, as much as humans are managing now. So partly this is what inner dance is doing. It's holding possible ways in which form and flow are able to have a relationship with each other. Like form. What is form? A lot of people are interested in, let's say, unforming minds, deforming minds, reforming minds, transforming minds. What else is there? The form as opposed to what? Form as opposed to flow. So when people think of inner dance as something that we do, this isn't so correct. Inner dance as a movement is something that holds the energy of the Divine Mother, and the Divine Mother is that which does not hold form. It is that which holds the movement from form to form, which is flow. So when you look at the sacred geometry that holds pure form, it's actually this ability to move from form to form. So this is what has been happening to us for a long time. Like form is a dimension, and early humans did not perceive things the way we perceive things now. They weren't able to hold as much. So whenever you are indoctrinated into a life, and you've had many, you need to indoctrinate yourself into form, and how that arrives to you is through like a story. Like we're interested in the story. At a certain point, we actually get really tired of the story, but you can't really just get rid of a story. You need to be initiated into life through a story. So going into philosophy, what is it that brings you into into this, you know, like when you're a baby, you, a baby seems to be this, but really no, when a baby is born, you know, maybe this is what happens supposedly when we die. When you're a baby, when you're born, you're actually born into a very, very big middle space. And there wasn't really so much of a beginning. And then there's, when you die, the question is, do things really end? This is what we perceive, okay? Like I'm watching a person going through a death process and the body dies and it seems like it's the end. But is that really true? When you die, does it end? Or is it possible that it actually begins? Or better yet, is it possible that there's actually just a big middle space? Man is interested in origins. Man is interested in like endings. What's the end? What's the end point? What's the point? Where does this all head? Where you would go when you die, it's not going to be the stopping of it. There's this illusion, and it's called the ending, where you can just stop and rest and take a long break and okay, I'm just going to stop. It doesn't exist. It's not there. There was never a beginning. The thing's never going to end. There's no end. There's no beginning. There's just this big middle space. So when you're born, and when a species is born, the way you're actually able to arrive at an existence or an incarnation is to believe that there is a beginning and there's an end. Religions, the sciences have this obsession with this, and anyone who arrives at the story needs a beginning and an end. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a story. That's what basically makes it essentially like a story. It needs to begin somewhere and it needs to end somewhere. So there's something about the mind that is constantly going to be searching for this. You give a body and a mind a whole bunch of stuff, and what it will do is to construct a story out of it. It's going to create what's called a chronology or a sequence. This is what time gave us. When we weren't in time, there was none of this. There was none of this. This comes before this, and then this comes after that. So the way you're indoctrinated or initiated here, what you have to do is you need to put things in order. There has to be certain things that came before this thing, that came before that, and then that puts me here now, and then certain things will happen after that. So if you were to break yourself away from this project called time, what would happen is you would rearrange, you would unform, you would disorganize like a lot of that. And a lot of that is happening in the inner dance process. So humans have been trying to do this for a long time. We've been trying to put things in order. We've been trying to put things in sequence. So I ask you, when you first went through your transformation, before the transformation, what was the story that you were holding? What stories were you told? What stories were stored inside you? What stories did you keep, speaking to yourself again and again? And then as things change, what are the new stories? What's the nature of the new story? That's not just to do with details, but has to do with form, has to do with the structure, has to do with the system itself. What are your stories? When I was growing up, a lot of my stories were biblical. I grew up in the biggest Catholic country in Asia, and I had to move through all these stories. You know, I became these stories. I became the things I used to worship. I can't read these stories anymore because I've moved on from those stories. Those stories hold chronology. And for those in the West, you should be interested in this because these stories are still there. These stories are embedded or latent, even though those stories are undergoing many transformations today. A lot of the systems in schooling, in economics, in governments grew with these stories. So for example, let's go back to the board because these are interesting things. For a long time, when you study history, not a lot of people like this word because there's so much of the HIS there. When you study history, so many of chronologies written through the from the time literature was being invented, went through the time the age of print, Western philosophy went into the age of enlightenment, age of reasoning. A lot of the story or chronology was very, very short. There was a short, let's call it a short chronology. The short chronology was so short. So in fact, a lot of the texts written back then stated that the earth and humanity and the universe was like this old. Okay. We lived for a long time within a short chronology, and this went on for a long time. In fact, a lot of this actually changed just about 200 years ago in our Western 200 years ago. Roughly 170 years ago is when this actually started to shift, so that now we're more or less at 4 billion years as a universe anyway, not as a species. So when I talk about the brain and time perception, something needed to change when we moved from 6,000 to 4 billion. Okay, what happened 200 years ago when there was a time revolution? Okay, like several things were happening in the 1860s, especially. There were books being written. Darwin wrote The Origins of the Species. Lyell wrote The Geological Evidence of the Antiquity of Man. Lubbock wrote Prehistoric Times. These were the moments when we realized that basically we are old. We're just old. Prior to that, we were not old. We were living here just, almost just yesterday. And right now, time passes by so fast that a year is just like a blip. So 6,000 years is nothing. So basically, like everything from rocks to mountains, lakes, all of these things were created just, not that long ago, and they, the whole of history just didn't really expand that much. So there's something about the mind that wasn't able to handle that much information. And so don't take for granted things. Don't take for granted like media. Don't take for granted technologies and communication that are so prevalent now. Don't take these as if they were normal. They've been there because we've been using them so much. We are we're still in the precipice of the change. And in fact, there's a lot of resistance still in many parts of the world that don't want to believe that we're that old. So this is what we're experiencing. And so know this, that when you hold a space, what are you initiating people into? What are you doing? What are you holding? This is what you're holding, like oldness. When I first experienced my inner dance, the words that came to me were, it began in Africa. In the chronology that was given to me in my school, in my schools, that wasn't the same. Like we were told that we came from the Garden of Eden, and we were actually taught the same thing, that we're not that old. God created the whole thing, and yeah, you can study a little bit of the science, but don't forget your religion. So these are mixed up. These were mixed up in my body, my headspace, my mind. And when the words hit me, when I experienced my first inner dance, when the energy came over me and it said, the mother and I are now one, and it said, it began in Africa, I think these were two different things. The first statement, the mother and I are now one, cancels out time. I remember this, like the first time the energy first came to me, like I strongly saw it so clearly. It's like time stopped. It totally stopped. Time stopped being real. And then time went backwards. I saw it. I saw time literally go backwards, like we're going through a shift, a polar shift. I saw time going backwards. So for over a long period of time, I had to go back into time, even as I'm holding this other time perception, this other reality of time. Time for me isn't the same. I'm never going to say time is not real. For me, I don't need to cancel out time. Time is something we constructed, and it doesn't do much to cancel it out. Say, okay, there's no time. We're actually going to cancel out mind, and it creates ego, basically, when you just keep saying that, okay, time isn't real. What do you mean? The whole thing holds the system. So if you're going to hold something systemically and not just, it creates ego, is what I would say. When you validate time, revalidate time, you begin to work with it in a way that you start to mold and shape the reality that we are co-creating together. So yeah, it took me years. It wasn't just instantaneous where the energy took over me and I understood it. I had to listen to a lot of sharings of people talk about going back to the womb, or going back to the earth, or becoming the earth, or becoming the universe. Yeah, that's the nature of the transformation. We're going into this, and it's huge for you, for us to understand that there was a short chronology just some centuries ago. It was just 2 centuries ago that we started to shift from here to here. I can give you supportive texts if you're interested in this. Like how did historians measure the earth before Charles Darwin, before Lyell, before Lubbock? You just have to read what historians were, how they were thinking about the world before the resistance broke. Yeah, so we're still in this process now, and you're going to be in this process now. Philosophy takes a part here. Philosophy plays a part. We need to go into it. We can't escape philosophy in this regard. So there was a question posted on the group about electricity and magnetism. What are the roles of electricity and magnetism in the spiritual journey? Magnetism that drops, electricity that rises. Magnetism equals time. When you increase magnetism, what happens is you increase time. You pack in more time, and when you electricity is space. It equates to space. So when you increase electricity, you increase the ability to navigate and hold more space. So what happens in the inner dance through music, through touch, through proprioception, what happens is when you hold the space, when you hold more space, time drops. That time undergoes a shift. At one point, time would rise up again. So we're interested in this event. What happens when time drops? Exactly, like in the Carlos Castañeda books, Carlos was asked the shaman, Don Juan, like, how do we approach the truth? Like, how do we arrive at the truth? How do we come into a knowing? And in shamanism, in Don Juan shamanism, ancient Mexican, South American shamanism, the instructions were you have to erase your personal history. Okay, so people call this the ego death. That is synonymous with this event, this rupture. Okay, when ego dies, time drops, and there were physicists who were speaking about an actual reduction of magnetism in the world, and physicists are also simultaneously observing that electricity, the ratio of electricity is rising in the world. Magnetism, electricity, these are the natural forces, gravity, the electrical force. So it seems like mind or time, history is dropping and vibration is rising. That people call Kundalini, life force, energy is rising, mind is dropping. And that's usually a time when change happens. So going back to this idea of chronology, okay. Let's go back to the Bible. Why did we arrive at this 6,000-year mark? How could we justify this? There's a strange thing in Western civilization textbooks like from the last centuries that speaks about the story that holds the idea of rupture, like to disrupt, to erupt, to interrupt. I remembered it because of this gecko in the background. I'm sometimes having a hard time holding a thought when it does that. Interruption, disruption. When you hold the inner dance, people experience the energy when you're able to interrupt or disrupt the thinking process, and then energy arises. That's one of the ways we understand the thing that drops and the thing that rises. We'll look at that slowly. So we arrived partly at the 6,000 years mark in Western history through the idea of like rupture, religion, and medieval historians were always interested in this idea of the catastrophic event. There was a catastrophism that was one of the main philosophies of the Middle Ages. And this actually stuck all the way through when literature and the Age of Enlightenment was coming through. So there were three major events in the Bible that stuck within Western history, so that even when we were discovering reason, the idea of rupture held hugely. So in the Bible, one story would be the fall from the Garden of Eden. The other would be the falling of the Tower of Babel. The one that was most huge, that is also shared in many mythologies and religions, is that there was a great deluge, or there was a great flood. So it's very, very interesting that in Western history in general, up until around 200 years ago, there was this idea that everything was wiped out at one point, and that there were no humans, there were no animals. There's this great flood that just came through, and everything was washed. So we had to restart over again. When I was going through my awakening process, I actually read this very, very interesting text where in the Bible, the man who took people on the boat was called Noah. And predating the Bible, there was a man in China who got 6 people, and they went into a boat, and everything else was destroyed by this great flood. And his name was Nu'u. And in Hawaii, there was the same story about this man who took his family into the boat. The story predates the Bible, and they survived this great flood. It's the same in Palawan. There's so many of these flood myths with the tribes, actually. So it's almost like in our memories, we remember a time when there's like a rupture. There's this point in which everything is destroyed, and we have to restart over again. And I think it's a question: do we need to keep doing that? Do we need to keep destroying things so we could have a restart over and over again, like from Atlantis, Lemuria, the biblical Great Flood, which is shared in other religions? I think we need to think about this because we're headed into the same thing. The waters are going to rise again. The Antarctica is the Arctic ice is melting. The Antarctica ice shelves are breaking, and the waters are rising. So there's this idea that we're not going to have a very favorable world. Still, it's inside our consciousness. This story is repeating itself somehow because it's there, not exactly, or not necessarily in a chronological way. So when I bring this up, what I bring up is this tendency in terms of this tendency, either in a society or in a singular person, for magnetism to descend and electricity to rise. When you hold inner dance, when you hold a healing space, this is what you're holding. The idea of like rupture. And this idea exists in history. What I'm trying to explain here in so many words is so much of our histories were written on the idea that things were wiped out about 5,000 years ago, and the Middle Ages actually acts as a placeholder for this rupture event. It may not make sense to you, but a lot of historians actually portrayed that after the flood, there was the Dark Ages, when everything went barbaric, and before we rediscovered Greek, Roman culture, because so much was biblical, we actually needed to reform our minds to go into a much older version of ourselves, and we had to heal this idea of this need to rupture, like to become old, to become really, really old means that we had to change the shape of this. Okay, that maybe to become old, these lines maybe need to become more long. You know, maybe we're trying to make this so long that this just becomes like a straight line. Here's the beginning, and here's the end. But in fact, there was something about the energy of consciousness that was a lot more oscillating, or a lot more vibratory in the past, and right now we're trying to make it look like this, to linearize things as much as possible. There's a reason why humans, through inner dance, through these modalities, are getting attracted to the energy of rupture. So I speak about this. I don't speak about this only from a societal point of view. I am, you know, I'm into healing. I'm a kind of healer. I'm a kind of spiritual space holder. I'm a facilitator. I'm also a philosopher. I'm also a researcher. And over the last years, I'm also a historian. I'm interested in the historicity of consciousness. I'm interested in what came before now, because I don't believe that the inner dance exists in and of itself. It exists as a rupture and as a disruption and an interruption based on what has been happening before the inner dance. This inner dance for me is not something that I do. Inner dance for me is a consciousness. It's not a modality. It's not a workshop. It's not a session. It's a consciousness, and we're moving into that we used to be in, yet something that we've never been in. Hard to explain. Yeah, I'm being interrupted again, which is good. So yeah, where am I going with this? The story of the ego, the story of the thinker, the story of our ego is in this. We think we're at the center of the universe. Even though we think we're old now, even though we know we're old, we're really egocentric. We're also very, you know, like human-centric. We think we're the most important. We don't think animals have as much intelligence as we do. We don't think plants are intelligent as we are, or even the minerals. And we need to come into a chronology that incorporates them, all of those, including everything in the universe, to become equal to us. And there needs to be a kind of ego death that happens to allow that to be. Now, when a spiritual awakening takes place, a real rupture happens. In Western philosophy, that rupture happened primarily in Descartes. We really need to bring him up because he features here largely. Descartes went into the opposite of inner dance. Descartes was famous for going into hyperbolic or Cartesian doubt. He basically went into a huge depression where he didn't know what was real and what was not real. You know, he went into the dream and he didn't know if the dream was real or if this was real. So that led him to actually supposedly found Western rational thought. And when he kept doubting, he arrived at this idea that that he is a thinking being, therefore he is a being. How he arrived at that was through his doubt. When he went into doubting everything, and a lot of people in the spiritual awakening are doubting everything. They're invalidating a lot. When people go into conspiracy theorizing, that's part of it. You know, it's like, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in anything. I invalidate reality. They're going into a repeat of what happened to Descartes. They're doubting reality. They're saying, okay, this is all illusion. So when Descartes did that, the only thing that he came up with that he could believe in was that he is thinking, because if he's doubting, then he's thinking. So he actually gave way to okay, then I exist. And so the problem partly with this, when people repeat this is the birth of ego. And the word for that is solipsism. Solipsism, as defined, is this condition in which a person believes that he or she is the only mind in the universe. So when you see anyone invalidating others, okay, I don't think others matter. What they think doesn't really matter. That they're going into a solipsistic reality. And when you go deep into the reduction of history and the reduction of magnetism, that's what happens. A solipsism happens. You know, nothing is real. That's what people would say. Okay, I don't believe in anything anymore. Nothing is real. There's a chance that electricity doesn't actually rise up, even as history falls. There are people who whose magnetism would drop. You know, the attachment to form, and yet electricity doesn't rise. You know, it doesn't go up. It just stays down there. It stays low. Electricity stays low. Magnetism goes low, and that's usually what accounts for. You're just depressed. You don't have the energy. At the same time, you can't hold on to anything. Nothing is real. Nothing is true. I don't know what to believe in, and I feel like crap. I feel like shit. I feel like mierda. That's an eventuality, and what we try to do in the work that we do is that we recognize this possible rupture, and we know that there is this tendency that when something drops, something could rise up. And so when you hold a space, when you contextualize things for your group, for your soul group, for your people who come to you, you hope that there would be this arising of energy that also coincides with the dropping of, this is flow, this is form. This is your trick. This is what you try to hold space for. So the words that you use allow people to surrender, okay, let go, but at the same time, know who you are, understand that you are amazing, that you have this innate capacity to awaken, to arise. So these are inbuilt. These energies are inbuilt. The energy descent and the energy ascent is inbuilt inside every single human being, inside every cell in every single human being. And so at one point, history for many people will drop, and a lot of people will be walking around the space, just being space, like empty space that doesn't hold historicity, doesn't hold details very well, doesn't hold, memories, doesn't hold. It tends to just not need words for a while and just be there, like just staring into space and just be pure being. But then eventually, because they are living in the world, you would have to find a way to let them come back to this. So you don't want to just say, okay, magnetism is evil. It's that which holds form. It's always thinking, always worrying. You want to work with it. It's a friend. So magnetism needs to rise up at a certain point. So that's how it becomes helical in many ways. This is your model. This is what you want to hold. So that once it drops to 0 point, you are wanting it to rise up again, so that people can go back to work. People can take care of the kids, or even have kids. People can take care of the garden. People can, without forgetting to hold this in check, even as they're arising back into form. And for that, history becomes important. Chronology, story, narrative, or narratology, these would still be key. Like, what would be the stories that you hold? What would be the stories people are holding? All right. So when people do first experience, they do become philosophers, and the first philosophy has to do with causality. We've talked about this, cause or causality. What causes things? In Aristotle, there were 4 causalities, and a lot of the things people actually ask, even when they come to me or to Inner Dance, they're holding this. What are the 4 causalities? So material causality would be asking, what is it made of? What is this energy made of? The efficient cause would be, where is it coming from? I got so many emails just the last weeks. Okay, I learned that you taught this to someone who taught me. Are you the source of this energy? Efficient cause would be, where is it coming from? Or what would be the agent that even makes it possible? Of course, I am not the source of anything. I'm just someone who's experienced this a lot. So sorry for bringing up that example. It's just to elucidate that when people become space, let's make another one. When people drop from magnetism and then they become electricity, there really is like becoming the baby mind, the fresh mind, the interconnected mind, the mind that hasn't really pruned away synaptic connections. And the baby is pure, but the baby is also vulnerable and very open. So anything you say around the baby will input like a supercomputer. The baby is pure wonder, pure awe. The baby is always in pure learning. The baby learns. Unlike the adult doesn't learn. The adult just thinks, okay, I know what I know already. I'm not interested. I don't want to learn. So when people become baby, the baby becomes very interested in, where is it coming from? So when they come to me, for example, they're partly coming from this interest in efficient causality. Like, where is it coming from, Pai? Is it coming from you, from the Divine Mother, from the earth? Where is it coming from? And then later they'll be interested, okay, but what is it made of? Now that I can see it's coming from everywhere. Like the final causation would be like, what's the point? What's the end goal? What is it for? And then the other causality, it's not the last, this is the other. It's formal. Like, what is the design? How is it shaped? How is it designed? All right. So when you become like the inner child, when you become the inner child, it's also like a universe where you to let go of your own history, your own story. You say, okay, I'm tired of my story. It's not a good story because it's a very short chronology. I know I'm much bigger. I know I'm much older. I know I'm ancient. I'm that. That's my story. You need to indoctrinate yourself back here into the first philosophies, which is causality. You need to initiate yourself back into history, and causality is usually it. To arrive at reason, something must have come from somewhere. You must have come from somewhere. The universe must have come from somewhere. So what story would you tell yourself as to the source? And what are you made of? You know, like what is the world made of? If you were taught that the world's made of matter, and so on and so forth. If you're going into energy, okay, if that's the new material, that's the new material cause. Like, how do I reorient everything around that? And then the final would be like the telos. Teleology would talk about purposiveness. This is interesting. Telos talks about the vision. What's your point? What's your reason for being here? Why did you come to the earth? Why are you inside your name? Why are you in your body, right? Is there even a point though? Do you actually have a reason? Or is there one reason? I personally am not sure. I would need to turn to philosophy to look at what humans have at least come up with to arrive at the telos. Okay, let's go back to the chronology of, okay, religion said we're 6,000 years old. What was that story anyway? And then we're now 4 billion years old. What is that story anyway? Right? What's the difference? What's the difference between this story and this story? Okay, this story was very God-centered. The telos was also theos. Theo is God. That's the prefix. And here, what is the center? Say the Earth is 4 billion years old. Say Earth starts to take root. A lot of this was because of Darwin, for example. Darwin helped us to go into, okay, we're 6,000 years old. It's Lyell who told us that no, rocks are old as well. So we came from rocks. Rocks are super duper old. So Earth becomes the story that holds the space. And so going back to causality, for example, you can see the difference between Darwinism and creationism. These are stories. You know, Darwin helped us to stretch out this to this. And when you stretch out from this to this, you would need to shift the stories in your head as to how you were created, how are you made, how are you constructed. It's a very, very different story. Like this one just said, okay, he did it. This guy, this dude, he just did it in 6 days. He did it, and then we've been here for this long. And then this guy said, no, 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 no. These guys, no, 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 no. This is the story, and this created it. So when you look at this word, then intentionality, which is a philosophical terminology, it's easy to hold intention here because of the top-down approach that, okay, he had a purpose. He wanted to do good. He was bored. He wanted to create you, me, plants, trees, lions, worms, germs, you know. So he did it. As opposed to here, we would have a hard time like applying intentionality if this was the cause. If we were to move from God as like the cause, the what created the matter, being the source, what designed the whole thing prior to, you know, scientific understanding, theological understanding, and then the point, like he must have had a point, which is, I don't know, to make sure that you do good, and if you don't do good, you don't go up there, you go down there. When we started to go into this other chronology, this other narrative, intentionality becomes different, you know, because what really what bridges God and earth, the thing that's in between God and earth for us is that. And we don't have a problem with the intentionality of man. It's just that when you lengthen chronology, and this is what's happening now, we're not able to accommodate intentionality here, because the question is that does the earth intend? Did the earth care? When you study the theory of evolution, the earth doesn't care. The earth just kind of did it through this long, this many years of experimentation. You know, we had this much time to make all the mistakes so that we could arrive at this one here now. As opposed to here, you know, there wasn't enough time, so we needed a chronology that would allow for everything to have perfectly arrived at what it looks like now from such a small amount of time. You know, there was an intensive intentionality, as opposed to if you had like a lot of time, then going back to causality, you may actually need to think about the telos event. Is there really an intention here? So this is what makes the speech by Ash a little bit important, because she honors the intention, but the way she uses the intention is not like the way you use intention. She talked about the intention to move, the intention of all beings, the intention to just be, you know, that the intention beneath what is the phenomenal. Phenomenal means to experience things through the senses. I don't have time to go into this with Descartes, where no, we need to go into it. Sorry, like we can't escape that. I'm sorry for being a little bit messy. It tends to get messy when we go into the philosophies. Philosophy is messy. Descartes, okay, gave us the ego of man. I think, therefore I am. But what he basically created was this problem of separation. He basically created a separation between the mind and body. And it became a problem. And this problem is called dualism. And this problem exists across religions, across economics, across the philosophies, across education, in terms of medicine. We don't really know what comes first. Is it the chicken or the egg? When Ash spoke, she says, neither am I the mind, nor am I the body. This is her seeing what is beyond it, but at the same time, it's not in the audio. She did explore the universe, and it was still there. She was not experiencing it as a concept of a mind and a body. So when the problem, I think, becomes more like a solution, you know, like a solution in chemistry, it's like the substrate upon which all the elements could float in, you know, all the conditions of possibility that could create outcomes. The mind and body just becomes a solution together. So inner dance as an energy is that solution. That, you know, the problem isn't solved. It just becomes a solvent. It just becomes a solution. It's you don't really need to attack a problem, because the problem isn't real. The problem is something we perceive. And when you go into a perception where the problem doesn't actually exist, not through avoidance, but going into a space where everything is connected and everything's happening for a reason, because you are, you know, inverting Descartes. You're going not into total doubt, but total trust, seeing, okay, everything's happening for a reason. The worst things that are happening are actually solving this, you know. For a person who lives in this, when they see this, they can see this hiding inside here. But when a person is in this, what they see is, even when this is happening, what they see is this. This is the only thing they see, even if this is happening. It's just a matter of perspective. But you cannot arrive at this when a dualism is happening. Okay? We cannot live in a dualism. There cannot be the great battle between darkness and light, matter and substance, mind and body. If we are to arrive at a solution. And we cannot get to any of this without a proper chronology. There has to still be a chronology that isn't going to cancel out history and time itself. There has to be a story that holds you here. And this would be the story that you hold for others. Because you're not just going to be there. It's like, let go of everything. That's actually going to create problems for people because they will not be able to confront things when they're not in the energy space. Because they don't just live in the energy space, they live in the world. And what hosts people in the world is like a structure. Okay, so I think maybe this should be enough as an introduction to the philosophies in inner dance. There's a lot more, like in the notebook, that's my mind. But in my notebook, my actual notebook today, I was just jotting what could be appropriate based on what we've covered so far in the last 7-8 weeks. And so this might help you. Maybe there's not that much theory here today that helps you to understand what to do with the music and how to touch people's bodies. But today would be really key in helping you, at least with, in the long term. Why would you talk about what you're going to be talking about? So you're going to be listening to a lot of stories. You know, okay, this happened to my mom, my dad, and my husband, my wife. This is happening at work. You're going to be listening to a lot of stories. If you want to hold a space, you're going to be listening to a lot of stories. And they will be listening to your story, or whatever story it is that you're going to be holding. So my question is, what story are you going to be holding? One that doesn't bore you, you know. So again, do you keep repeating the same statements that you write down and memorize, just like in school? Today more or less helps you build empathy. So when someone approaches you or the room that you hold, how do you understand them? You know, beyond just the details, how do you see them? How do you see their mind? What's your empathy in a way that, if you're going to lead to a transformation, how do you see their mind? Like what's changing? What's the system here? You know, like what's their history? What's the history of the history itself that's going to be changing? How are they holding time perception? And as you move them into other horizons and vistas and experiences, how do you safely bring them to their oldness? There's so much objectivity there. You know, there's not that much people can project onto you and to themselves. There's not that much they can keep identifying with if you are holding something old enough that's not just particular to one spiritual part of the world, that's like a bubble, you know, that's according to one mysticism, one mythology. What, you know, this should free you up in a way. And I believe that when human beings are born, this is what they're looking for. Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where does this all lead? And what am I? You know, what have I been through? What is my nature? Would you satisfy that in others, or would you just feed what they're wanting to hear, which isn't always what they're needing, like really deeply needing to hear as a consciousness? So maybe you have questions, maybe you have insights, maybe you can interrelate some of the experiences that you've had. It's pretty much okay. Once it's spoken, you can see more. But if it's not put into words, then there's like a hodgepodge that may relate to your person or to your humanity. But when you do become energy, when some things are being held, and you know, then you might see more. So Mimi, you raise your hand first. Thank you.
Yeah, there's something that my mind is still putting together from all the pieces that you said, along with something that I had been thinking about for a long time about history. Because I used to hate history as when I was in high school. It was my worst subject because I just hated it. It was so boring, and it wasn't until not too long ago in my adult life when I started to see it in a different way, you know, just with history of events and things like that, history, I learned that history provides context to the now. And history can be manipulated and framed in a certain way to change a narrative that's happening now. And it could also be wiped away and eliminated to, you know, in someone's outside of somebody's knowledge in order to create a story about now. And it's really interesting, the example with the age of humanity, of humans, because basically that change from the 6,000 years to, you know, however long they're saying now, it changed the context of what it is to be a human. You know, what does it mean to be in this embodiment? And also I wrote something here, like when we drop, because when you made a comment about our history, or rather our ego, and when we drop that, we're basically becoming a blank slate right now, and we can recreate ourselves new. And another thing that came to mind is when we see somebody and we see what their history is, that framing of the history can mean one thing, can make a person, you know, feel like they are a certain way now. This is my life now. This is me now. And then the reframing of it, or the thinking of the history in a different way, can actually create like a new person. So yeah, I'm still gonna be absorbing all that and putting it all together, because it's a lot. It's really good. I think this is like turning into something for me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it seems like we're just putting words, but structurally it holds a lot. It's everything, because it's in the experience. I think, you know, there's cognitive dissonance in a lot of people who receive the experience and the possible truths, but we want to lie. We can't really become the universe. We can't really become the earth just yet. We're still enjoying our humanity. We barely enjoyed our humanity, and then we're supposed to become the universe, even though it could be true that the universe can enjoy its humanity. That's what I mean about framing. So the way people use words have to come from a paradigm, which is a worldview. So it's not actually the words that are being spoken that's of import. What is substantial would be, what's your understanding? What's your worldview that then would just use these words to outline, you know? So when we use the words like framing, this is more paradigmatic. Paradigmatic in semiotics would be the ability to hold the big picture, and history would be called syntagmatic, which is how do you put all of these elements in the big picture into a line. So it's really important to say that when people go through a deep healing, a deep awakening process, a deep unstructuring, they really destroy the old story in so many ways. And the story is embodied, like literally when you disembody the story, you totally become another person, and it can be really vulnerable and it can be really weird. And the process of becoming another person doesn't take weeks. It should not take weeks. It shouldn't take months. It takes a long time. You know, so literally, discombobulated mind cannot hold sequence really well. Discombobulated awakening minds can't really sequence. They can't put things in order so well. It's like, okay, what comes after this? Because you can see so much, and it's taking a while. So there's a kind of training involved to go back there. And so when you talk about the importance of contextualizing things, you know, it's like sometimes you meet someone, other words in semiotics that's beyond paradigmatic and syntagmatic would be synchronic and diachronic. So to arrive at a synchronic understanding of a person or a concept, you don't need the story. You just need the essence of the person. But could you really know a person without the story? So the more you get to know the person, then, oh, okay, yeah, that's you. But I think where we suffer is when we hold too much of the diachronic, when we hold too much of the story that's not holding the essence or the substance. That's when trauma comes, because then we keep going into this story of victimization, traumatization, colonization, where we're small, we're wounded, we're built with trauma and psychoses and neuroses. Like framing would require that we hold synchrony and paradigm. Like we can't lose that. So story is okay, sequence and chronology is okay, but what we're losing is like the big picture. And very few people around us can speak the big picture. In fact, like so much of social systems needs to hold more of the small picture, because that's what could, you know, lead to success, to so there are many types of histories. There are histories. What bored us in school would be more of the history of the world, because intuitively we know that maybe a lot of that is based on who wrote the story, you know, who constructed that story. In postmodern thought, there were these thinkers like Michel Foucault, Roland Barthes, who wrote texts like The Death of the Author. What is an author? Postmodernism was about coming into distrust on authority and authorship. And a lot of that was inculcated in the West through book-based learning cultures. You know, when you can write a book and then you can publish that book and millions of people read that book, you can change their minds. And that's a way of achieving power. So there's a huge distrust in terms of who is the author, because the author holds authority. When the internet came, when modern media came, there is a greater death of authorship because a lot of people have voice now that wasn't so available before. So this is to say brains are changing so that we're not so linear anymore. We're not so disempowered anymore. And we're having to accommodate for those changes. But there's something happening in media where we're actually losing a lot of what we gained in book-based learning. People don't know how to read anymore well because the mind is operating like way too fast. So time underwent shifts in the last 2 decades, and inner dance is helping to accelerate the shift, but also to help slow something down. So the re-arrival at history, like being able to contextualize, for example, is a great gift. Like sometimes when people go through a long transformation, I would ask people simple questions like, could you talk about that in like 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs? And they would get shocked. It's like, I can't. So much has happened. It's like, what do you mean? But then over time, when they're able to contextualize things in a way that's tighter, more compact, which isn't coming from, you know, this deep desire to be seen, to be heard, from certain emotions that still hadn't been sorted out. When the emotional charge isn't so much there anymore, and there's not the self-doubt and insecurity and shame and guilt and anger, there's this kind of coldness that arrives that's more able to hold objective truth. So sometimes you will meet certain people who can speak about history like in a simple way, you know, like so the kind of history that we are interested in, if we are interested in a history in inner dance, what we're interested in is not the history of the world, because that's already, you know, disproved through the death of the author, through Einstein's theory of relativity. What we're interested in is, what is the history of consciousness? That's a very, very different history. It's not the history of matter, the thing that's rigid, that's you know, but what is the history of the mind? Of the mind that's also the mind of the universe that's there even after you die, which is more appropriately called consciousness. What is the history of consciousness? And then you would go into time perception, or the awareness of space, the awareness of electricity and magnetism. So then when you go into the inner dance, and then when you hold space for other people, that becomes more of not just a manipulation of the energy in people's bodies. It actually becomes like a school. You become interested, basically. You become interested in, okay, I'm holding this space, this body, this energy, but this is also a consciousness. So when I perform the music, when I hold the energy of the body, when I hold the body, when I speak these words, how is this mind changing? You know? So the history of it would change. Even with the simple things that you say, they would remember so much just by the simple way you utter certain key elements that bring them back to, oh yeah, you know. So instead of just saying, okay, leave your work, leave your, you know, forget about your problems, the moment you say that, they're actually holding the energy of the problem there, because you're negating the problem. But holding something much larger would allow them to experience the truths of themselves in that way. So yeah, I think there will be some resistances in humanity itself when letting go of its own humanity, but there could be a greater humanity with what is not human, that's not incorporated in the story of the human. In fact, this is the thing that I wasn't able to speak about, that I wanted to speak about. The whole resistance between let me look for it, the 6,000 to, where is that? Okay, let's just clean this up. what is history? Historians defined history based on what was recorded history, actually, what was written down. So what was not part of history was called prehistory. So this is the global shock. Like, historians are now having to accommodate prehistory as part of history, like what was not recorded in books and in rocks, you know, writing in rocks and parchment, and this needs to account for the greater story. And that was not, you know, there was so much resistance in most historians prior to 200 or 300 years ago. They wouldn't dare, if they went into history that was before what was recorded, and writing started about then, when it comes to really simple writing, you know, creating etchings on clay, on rocks. We weren't interested in what was before this. We wouldn't dare, because we were empirical. We were, you know, it's too open to conjecture. You know, it was too subjective. But now we're having to accommodate for what came before this. So social scientists, anthropologists, historians in general, people in climate change, they're having to remodel the whole science and philosophy of time and space that wasn't able to accommodate for what's called deep history. So even in schools, and I guess even in hospitals, this is not yet in practice, because it's still actually under debate for many people, are still in fact resisting this. There's still creationism versus evolution. There's still a grand debate happening, and there's cognitive dissonance, and a lot of participants, they don't know which to hold. They're exposed to a lot of these ideas, but they're not actually able to decide whether they would approach causality from a theological or an anthropocentric or you know, an earth-centered or a universe-centered space. So I think you yourself might need to take a stand as to what you're representing here. Probably you would want to hold both. You know, the human is important, but also the universe is important. So you're not here to just hold one paradigm. You probably would hold other paradigms along with the one that's still kind of here, that's on the way out. I want to see if other people have things to share, questions or insights or experiences. This might explain some of the types of playlist experiences you might be having as well. Don't know. Okay, go ahead, Mikhail. Just unmute yourselves as well.
Yes,
if
all
you can.
right. I have a question, maybe it's not directly related with it, but about the energy that we can feel, experience. Is it true that it's only through humans and not through animals, which is kind of difficult to understand, because some people have been saying that to me. And the reason why they say that is because I have heard two different reasons. One is that we are vertical, humans are, and animals are more horizontal, but then a kangaroo is also horizontal, vertical. And the other I don't remember anymore. Maybe it's more like in I think it's something like that we can think, and more in the thing like this car, For that reason, I don't remember exactly the second reason anymore. I would find it very selfish if we would say that as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. Your question is very evolutionary in nature. In the first place, based on the story of evolution, which we're not canceling out, we were animals. So in a way, we're still animals. So like we have a cow that gave birth last month, I think, or a month and a half ago. And I've been watching this baby cow. This cow is amazing. It knows what to do. It's just hopping around. It moves really fast for a baby cow. It's, you know, thin legs, but I'm just watching it all the time. It's like, wow, this cow knows what to do. And I don't really watch the mama cow giving instructions to the baby cow that, okay, eat this and go there. And so it got me to think of like worms and germs and dogs and bats and cats and birds. They don't teach anything to these guys. They don't have schools. They don't have high school diplomas. They don't have master's degrees, but they know what to do, you know? So some of it's still kind of trial by error, where they do some silly things that you normally would think, okay, why would it do that? That's stupid. But it does a lot of things that are super smart. And so there's something embedded in them that's not thinking. Humans, I don't think we used to think in this way, that we would need to educate people. There was this idea in the Middle Ages called preformationism, where the idea was that in the womb, the baby is already preformed and is not actually a baby. We didn't know what a baby was in the Middle Ages. So when the baby comes out, you don't treat them like a baby. You don't put them to school. You just treat them like an adult and they know what to do. You know? And then somehow we ran into this idea from 500 years ago, 400 years ago, that no, the baby is stupid. And the baby isn't preformed, and you need to treat it like a baby and like a stupid person. And I think that probably applies to the way we understand animals now as well, which probably has a lot to teach us. I think it is interesting that we are vertical, that we're bipedal, that we stood up, and that allowed us supposedly to develop the neocortex, which is a lot bigger than in animals. So I do believe that we have a time perception that's not the same as animals. But every time we keep saying that we're better, it's not just selfish, it's arrogant. It's more like it's arrogance. It doesn't allow us to learn from the system itself. And I think that's a big nature of the problem. So I get you. And so when you do create your playlists, when you do start to hold your space, try to put animals there. Don't just put human sounds. Like I try to put insects there. I put I even have the sound of dinosaurs, dinosaur steps, just to help people remember. And it actually brings some people back to the Jurassic, the Paleolithic, the Neolithic. So so this becomes really applicable when you think about, okay, when I make a playlist, do I get something from some, you know, club music and from London or Berlin? If you're going to play the music of the earth, how would that be different from the music of a club scene in Amsterdam or in New York? You know, this makes things interesting. Like how old would be the sounds that you use? You know, could you get sounds from that were recorded from Saturn or from the moon? Like how much do you spread things out? What would be the rhythmicity of ancient man as compared to the kind of rhythm that's in someone modernized who's kind of stuck in just that one space. So I think we are here to break the arrogance for sure. This could be one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. We don't need to wear this out all the time that, well, okay, I'm here to break your selfishness, you're selfish. That would just make people defensive, but we can sneak in these invitations for people to remember the true nature of themselves. So one would be spacey, it would bring them into outer space, but to bring historicity there, the kind of question you just held was Darwinian in nature. It's evolutionary. It's to stretch out the chronology. Because what's wrong with most people is they think, okay, I'll be here for 60 years and then I'm done. And when we think about the animals, no, you weren't here for 60 years. You're the product of like a lot. And if you don't acknowledge your ancestry in that way, then you think you're just you. You have a name and you just were here for a short time, and that's for me, that's suffering. You could try to be happy with that kind of story, but it's too limited. It's too small. So to help people remember the part of them that's the condor, the serpent, the gecko, the eagle, they would share later, wow, I was flying, I was slithering, I was like the mushrooms, I was the microbes. So speak the story through the vibration, through sound as well, and break the ego creatively. You know, it's already huge that we're able to talk about this. This should open up like a lot of spaces, because the temptation is really when people walk in, we see them, oh, they're human beings. They're just persons laying there on yoga mats, and I have this this device, but you really want to see them like as they are, and you want to respect that. You want to hold the tools that honors that. So yeah, bring more animal, plant, mineral into human, you know, environments. Thank you. Good one. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, I can speak more if you guys are still with me. The history of consciousness. Yeah, it's interesting. History of thought. There's something about the story that's not just chronological. Like, what's the story of death, for example? Okay, so you have the story of the universe, and you want to interrelate that with the story of you. It's not easy. You would need to bring in birth and death there somehow. So what happens when people die, when they're able to talk about it, the ones who came back from death? What happens to the universe as well? There are interrelations there, and the way you hold the music and the energy is so much it as well. There was a big bang. In the beginning was the Big Bang. What was that about? And in the end of the universe is the black hole. Okay, so let's go to the board. These are stories that are being told now in the sciences. You know, the human mind is able to perceive these, and for me, that alone is just amazing. So the story of the Big Bang was, you know, we hear the word bang. It's like a sound, like a story began with sound, the bang. Basically, there's this tendency there for a point to become like many points. It was said that 97% of the universe is created in an infinitesimal moment in time. Like suddenly, boom, everything was there. we exploded into existence, and slowly the universe began to keep expanding from this super dense, super condensed point, and now we're moving away from the middle. So there's this process of what you might call emergence or convergence, the root of which is verge. Sorry, no, it's not convergence. It's emergence or divergence. Okay, so these two are connotative of when a birth happens. And I don't know how many times I've listened to people coming from inner dance say, I witnessed the birthing of the whole universe, like the Big Bang. I saw it. I went back there. It's really hard to listen to that sometimes. Like, what? You went back to the Big Bang? Yeah. I did. I went there. I saw all life emerge from the point. So from the point, there has to be like a divergence, and that's the energy of birth. But that's not the only energy that happens. For a lot of people, the energy is quite the opposite. It's like from the stuff that happened in life, everything external, everything outside. There's now this point in which people return to the middle, and that's convergence. So when people speak about, let's say, death, it sounds so scary and romantically dire. It's like, it's like the end. It's not. If it's just an energy, if it's a tendency that exists in all beings, all things, all ideas, all entities, death is just a convergence. So when people share the experience of death and come back to talk about it, the story, okay, this is the story. You could tell the story to yourself as a consideration, and this could be a way you understand the death energy in the spiritual process. Death is an inloading of what had been projected outwards. So in the Big Bang, energy needs to be offloaded from the point, the middle point, the super dense point. Projections need to happen instead of reception. When you die, which could be symbolic, every time your ego dies and you take responsibility for everything that's happening. You're not projecting, you're receiving. What you do is you inload everything that had been projected outwards. That's the energy of death. And when you birth, you offload. Okay, so death is the inloading of what had been offloaded. So the illusion is that the Big Bang happened, billions of years ago, but actually, what if the Big Bang is not a moment in time? What if it was a tendency? What if it exists inside every cell, every molecule, every atom, every quark? So every moment, like the second, there could be a Big Bang and there could be like a black hole, both of which are experientiable in the inner dance. This is all that's happening. It's either you're offloading information, when you die. So let's clean this up. What does that actually look like? There are stories here. So in the beginning, the self needs to project itself outwards. So there's this illusion that there are others in the world, otherness in a Levinasian philosophical theoretic. So in the beginning, we're this, and then okay, my mom is not me, my dad is not me, my sister, my things, my objects, my toys, my car, my bank account, and so on and so forth. The self projects itself outwards. So this is not me. This is not me. That's like another point. That's another point. That's another point. That's what happens from birth onwards. And when you die, what happens is literally the other becomes, this is weird, the other becomes a self. And then the self becomes an other. This is partly what Ash was trying to describe in some words, where she wasn't her mind or her body. The self was in the experience, but it knew that it was not it. That's what happens when you die. And you can die in the inner dance or in the spiritual experience. The self becomes, you literally will experience like, oh, okay, I suddenly became my dad. And I saw my dad looking at me in a way that I didn't see myself because I was me. So you become everything outside. You become everything in the universe that had been projected or offloaded outwards. And then in that process of inloading, you take responsibility. You suddenly own up to everything. And you know, like the life review, in the near-death experience, the life review would have it that you would experience this in only one, they say 1 second, but it's probably not a second, it's like a millisecond. It's like 1 point. In 1 point in time, suddenly is like in pure space, like, wow, everyone is me looking at me, and I've not seen myself in that way before. So this is death. Death is basically like an inloading. So you would start to understand where intentionality actually gets defined there. When you're born, when you're still diverging or emerging into other parts of you that you will later deny that is not you, instead of intentionality, you experience extensionality. Okay, to speak about the usage of the term intentionality in phenomenology is used as a term to describe essences. Intentionality is, to Franz Brentano, is the irreducible point. So if you keep, let's say, dividing you from you know, like, okay, that's you, and then let's divide you, and then let's divide you, and let's divide you, make you smaller and smaller and smaller. If you arrive at the most infinitesimal point, let's symbolically say that's in the middle. If you can't divide or reduce yourself anymore, what you arrive at, interestingly, is intentionality. So this becomes primarily important in Edmund Husserl's phenomenology, a branch of philosophy that you might encounter again and again. Phenomenology is interested in reducing all of the phenomenon, all of the things that you can perceive through your senses. That's a phenomenon. And then arrive at the irreducible point, the monad, the smallest point, the essence, the purity that is you. So what phenomenology does is it learns to bracket out the judgments, you know, like the practice in phenomenology is to pretend as if you know nothing about someone. So, you know, take out the details in the stories without canceling it out. Sorry, it's not to take it out. It's to perceive the phenomenon as they are, but to keep peeling away the layers of the onion. Bracketing is the term, so that you can arrive at the singular point. So in a way, phenomenology achieves a kind of ego death, because people are interested in the phenomenon. Okay, what was that image? What did he say again? What happened? What was the trauma? What is the problem? But when you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, when you experience the death, the death stage. What you arrive at is the heart, the middle space or the core. So that is actually why Ash's sharing was so deep without her knowing, her mentioning intentionality and saying the inner dance was phenomenal. She was actually saying inner dance is a phenomenology. Phenomenology is interested in what is at the core of all of your thoughts, so that you don't cancel them out. Like don't remove your thoughts, just keep digging deeper so that you arrive at the core, the heart of things. So people then have this misconception of ego death. They think that the ego death is the removal of ego. It is not, based on the mapping of how we inload and offload consciousness. The death of the ego is more of going into the core of the ego, which is identity, ID, inner dance, identity, like the core of you. So literally, this cannot happen without a retro causality. Now we can explain inner dance, why it is, what is happening. Retro causality is time going backwards, so it seems, but it's actually not. It's when you look at time, what's the backwards of time? It's this word. So to emit means to transmit, but to actually reverse time, it's to reverse transmission or emission. It's to undergo a reception, to receive that which was sent out in the origins of time. You know, the sender could have been the universe or God, so that later the universe or God or goddess would receive its own message, and it needed time as a construct in order to. So that's why we created the universe. We needed to emit the essence of who we are. You know, could be magic, could be spirit, could be the absolute, so that there would be a feedback mechanism. So the receiver as well would send out the sender messages. So the sender would, you know, this would just circulate. And this could not have been possible without dimensionality. This could not have been possible without dimensionality. So one of the reasons why inner dance is being given to us is that we experience time, the construct of time, differently. So we're not changing time. What we're doing is we are not just receiving, it's perception, reception, it's the same word. Basically, we're experiencing a different dimensionality of time where divergence and convergence coexist. This is only partly true, this geometry, thinking that, okay, this is the self, or this is an other. If you were to map out the universe in greater objectivity, the other is also an aspect of the self, and then everything revolving around that self also revolves around other selves that are others. So what we're learning to do is to treat every single point as if it was an aspect of the self, even as it is in fact authentically like an other. We're not okay anymore with separating the self and the other, and it's when you die that you experience the nature of this construct, how we're able to do this, how each neuron, how each being, how each thought is actually interconnected to everything else perfectly, everything mirroring each other perfectly. That's what happens when you go there. But before we go there, we can have a glimpse, we can experience this. I had this experience once I was in a really noisy place. I was some kind of video arcade. You know what a video arcade is. You know, you have these machines making super loud sounds. So I was in the video arcade with my daughter. How do I draw a daughter? I'm a really bad artist. Sorry. Her name is Isa. And I think she was 2 years old. And I was here in this video arcade. It was super duper loud, it was super noisy. Everyone was just screaming, shouting, doing their thing. And I went beside my daughter, and what I did was I sat beside her. I knelt beside her, and then I wanted to see how Isa was seeing the world. And I just looked at her, and then I looked at the things that she was looking at, and she looked at me, and then she was letting me know just by the way she was looking at me that everything that I'm looking at is part of my dream, Dad. And when I received that, I had this sudden recognition that I don't exist. I'm actually a thought inside my daughter's brain and mind and body and energy field. And in that moment, I experienced total liberation where, oh wow, one of the greatest fears people have is like judgment. They don't like being judged. They don't like being projected upon. What they want to do is just keep their own identity and to keep thinking how no, to keep seeing themselves as though they want others to see themselves. But what I learned from that, which happened about like 12 years, no, sorry, my daughter's not 12 years old. She's 9. So that was 7 years ago. We're all projecting each other's images onto each other. And when we try to hold on too much to the image, something happens. There's like a battle. And when I speak about this experience with my daughter, this is a long experience. This is how I've been experiencing my relationship with my father, my mother, my everyone. Like I understand life through projection and reception. And every time I was bullied in school, every time I was attacked, every time I perform a defensive mechanism, when I try to control the situation, I don't experience the inner dance. So the inner dance was the moment of death where I allowed everything that had ever been projected to be received in total responsibility. I realized that I'm actually just a thought. I'm not just a thinker, but I'm a thought. I'm a thought inside your head. You're actually thinking of me now. You're creating me. You're making me possible. I'm saying all of what I'm saying now because of everything that you are, everything that you're creating, everything you're ready for right now, everything that leads to this moment, that it's you. It's not just me, it's you. Everything that you've ever experienced leads to me and everything happening around you right now. But the same is true as with you. Like you're there because I am making you up. We're making each other up together, as well as the whole world around us. We're making it up exactly as we are right now. And the moment I acknowledge the fact that I'm not just a cause, I'm not just prime cause, I'm not just trying to cause you, trying to manipulate you, control you, so that the image stays as what I want it to be. That's when I feel liberated. Like I'm really just a thought. I'm not actually a person dimension, in a dimension, I'm not a person per se. I'm a projection. You're projecting me. And you know, like the moment I can touch you as a projection, the thought is already changing, and you're not the same person anymore. So the more we can keep doing that around everywhere, I think that's what would do it. Like there's something about this work, this inner dance work, this energy process work, that's supposedly to be able to help people to arrive at this unconditional holding and being held. So going back to the story with Ash, would that be interesting for you? That everything that you're experiencing right now outside is the voice of your ego. It's just for her, she totally experienced it. Like everything she intended, I was saying, like I was a part of her. I don't know how much she or others or even me are able to take this outside of the spiritual experience. But when you are in that inner dance or Kundalini space, when bodies are moving, you might notice that when someone screams, cries, makes a movement somewhere, it somehow seems to be interconnected with the other emotions, the other perceptions, right? So it's almost like we're experiencing the whole room becoming conscious of itself and beginning to express itself as all these different elements. It's just one mind and one body. This is what it is. This is what it has been. This is what it will be. I'm explaining it to you. That's the reason, especially in the group process, that's the reason why, you know, certain things happen. Someone first screams, cries, and this and that, and then it leads to all these other experiences. It's like there's this one, there's only one being that was pretending that there was many beings, and there's only one day pretending that there were all these days and there are all these places, but there's only this one place. And when the place and the day and the being remembers that oneness, it acts as if it was one body, basically. It acts as if it was one mind. So if there was no separation between the ego and the voice, you would get into this awareness that, you know, everything that's happening, that's just me. That's because of something. It's not exactly a causal deterministic linear thing, but there's still a retrocausal. This is all somehow expressing itself because you know, I'm trying to describe it. It's kind of there. It's not just the words, but everything about this is that. It's designed for that. It's designed to go back to that, to have a remembrance of this thing. This thing that people will want to call like a workshop. So if you were to hold the energy, you're either going to be holding one of two things. You're going to be holding a divergence or a convergence. A divergence isn't negative. It's just like when you were before you were the Big Bang, you were this one super intense point, like the seed, right? And then you didn't want to be a seed anymore. You wanted to be like a plant, and then you wanted to become like a forest. And it's really painful to be a seed because you know the potential. You hold this energy of pregnancy, like you can become more, and you're not yet that. It's just like this inbuilt thing, and it hasn't been offloaded. But there's also a suffering in being born, because once you let loose the potential, what happens is you become actual, and to become actual is to become solid and reduced, and there's more in the potential that hasn't been linearized or actualized. Your potentiality is like an ocean of possibility, And actuality means to just become like you, your story, your trauma, your patterns, your cycle, your details. So in a way, we're the death is the black hole. The black hole is the return to infinite magnetism that holds infinite time. So when people say, okay, time doesn't exist, you're not entering the black hole, you're actually trying to cancel out time. The black hole is an aspect of the universe and the mind where you can experience infinite time. And you can experience that in the dream state, in the psychedelic awareness, in the inner dance, and in the near death. And probably when you're in the womb. You're when you're inside the womb, you're experiencing infinite time, which is infinite magnetism. It's the Christopher Nolan Inception time. It's like forever time. It sounds really, really interesting. It leads to the idea of immortality, but we're bored with infinite time. We don't like infinite time because it doesn't allow you to live in the story. If you live in infinite time, you would go through infinite loops. In every moment, you would live like the Groundhog Day guy, where you just keep living that day again and again and again. And there's too many versions of that, and you can't construct adventures. You can't make mistakes. You would just be perfect. And we didn't design it that way. We can't move from darkness to light and light to darkness if we lived in too much space. So you actually had to create this way of experiencing life through the story, so that you can enjoy the story not in just 1 second or a million years, but something that has a clear beginning and a clear middle and a clear end. That was the case. Right now we're moving into more substance, still holding story. You still want the story, but you want to hold more essence. You want to hold more paradigm and vibration when you go into the syntagmatic or the diachronic. You want to hold more of the truth of the universal part of you, even as you enjoy that, okay, you're only human, you're limited, you might be boring sometimes and corny and wounded, but the more you're able to hold. So all of this needs a new brain. All of this needs a new body. And you can't have a new brain without a new time perception. The only reason why you're changing the brain is you're changing your perception and experience of time. So divergence, emergence, convergence. Know what you're holding. Know that you can hold both. I think to draw it out, which is often useful. Okay, like again, like if this is time, if this is space, and this is time, if this is the point, there's usually like so much in space that exists infinitely that gets reduced in time. So there's this like selection process that needs to happen. So talking about births, for example, like the masculine, the father, this would be like sperm cells, right? And they all have to compete. All these sperms need to compete to get to the one egg. So the egg is the egg symbolically is this, and the sperm is this. The sperm need the one sperm needs to compete. It's Darwinian in that way. There's like natural selection, which is a story of evolution through competition. Like all of these guys need to go to war. Your dad's many points or particles needed to, and then the feminine is the womb, the container for the one. So naturally the masculine was holding that which needed to converge, like the many needed to go into just one, which is here. Whether that's probably neither masculine, neither feminine. There are tendencies and aspects of all of us, not just the woman or the man, because your mother and father are both inside you. So there is this energy of convergence that was always already there in the offing of you. And then when you were born, you were really just that one egg. And then that egg needs to split in terms of the genesis of other cells. That one cell becomes two cells, then that splits, and then that becomes 4 cells, and that just keeps splitting and splitting. So then you're now trillions of all these little minute things that's all you. So there's this process of synthesizing a lot of that. So what's the point here? What's the big point? The reason why people are suffering is when we're born into time, we're born into causality. And causality is really a mechanism that allows us to limit infinity so that one point causes another in a deterministic, reductive, materialistic universe. When you go into inner dance consciousness, which is something you can only experience usually in the black hole or in the dream or in the psychedelic universe or in death, you go back to this, you go back to that. There's this energy that allows all of that which has diverged or emerged in time. It swoops you back into like the many. So in a way, this looks like an hourglass, right? But you make that all one. You make that all one. You make it all one. This is you. This is your geometry. This is what you actually look like. This is what the womb space looks like. And so when people actually see the energy, they often describe like the Taurus, the Merkaba, the Star of David. What is it that you're actually looking at? It's the movements of all things within each and every single like point. Like you're not a dot, you're not a point. Like you're like a multitude, a potentiality, an ocean of points, each of them wanting to achieve some kind of balance. And when you lose balance, it means that you're either too much in a divergence, which is how ego projects itself outwards, or too much in a convergence where you're in shame, you're in a death process, you're not creating anymore, you're just like absorbing like the whole world. So to hold creativity and reactivity, perception, reception, means like your chronology needs to be from Big Bang to black hole. It's as simple as that. Like from birth to death, you need to hold the energy of both. If you're not, then you're too monodirectional. You're just heading towards a predetermined outcome that you're trying to intentionally hold from a limited dimension. Like you need to stretch out the chronology. You need to stretch out the possibilities that have been too linearized. And here's where you see the energy of the story really coming over you. There's something wise in what Mimi said that really relates to, let's say, colonization, for example, because there are many parts of the world that were given short chronology that actually held long chronology. In the East, there was this idea of super oldness, and when, let's say, Catholicism and Christianization came, we were told that that you're not old. You're actually thousands of years old. So the stories that are being held across the world are really intermixed, and for that reason, a lot of people are interested in testing out other chronologies that would psychology help them to keep stretching out. So okay, I'm studying like the Indian thing, that's at least like not just God was born 2,000 years ago. That's maybe the religion is, you know, a lot older. And then you get interested in the science, which looks at a chronology that's even longer in a cosmic quantum sense, that looks at the age of the multiverse and not just through, you know, God names and the names of energy and so on and so forth. So yeah, they just take care, just take great care in what stories were given to you a long time ago. They're still in your body, that's undergoing transformations, that you can't just overnight like let them go. They're going to be there because they were formative, they were part of you when you grow up, and there's a reason why you were born through that. And then like, what are the stories that you're surrounding yourselves with now? What are you resonating with? What are you pulled by? What are what are the stories that you resonate with, that hold more of you, not less of you? You know, sometimes you get attracted to certain communities, certain persons, because they're able to hold like more, and you know that there are some people who are holding much less, who are using terms and circular loopy things that's not really commensurate to what you are now, what you are now. So yeah, do this for yourself. You deserve it. Give it to yourself, and I'm hoping today empowers you to do this for others. Like you know, like what story are you telling others actually? What stories are you telling others? You know, what do the details matter? What's the bigger, what's the big picture anyway? You know. Okay, so that's exactly 3 hours as usual. Go back to your books, get interested in good books that hold things that interest you. You will notice that it will do something in your mind. Don't just rely on social media or digital media. Go back to school, reconstruct your mind, become your genius slowly. Now that you know you're forever, and even after you die, you're still going to be here. You have enough time. You don't need to rush. You can really enjoy the reconstruction of you as a universe. Be really interested in yourself. To be like a child is to be in awe. The beginning of philosophy is wonder. To wonder means to learn something new. Again, not to pretend I already know that and I'm not interested. Have the brain state of a child that's able to learn multiple languages, multiple instruments, multiple skills, because of openness and humility and you know, like and put time into it every single day. Don't just hold the energy. If you hold the energy, you will not hold the constructive part. The energy is really good at the deconstructive part. Whole, like, study things that can complement the energy, that are structural in nature. Those could be philosophical, those could be musical, those could be You know, even body structural, to get interested in working with the body, get interested in how language works, you know, like how do we communicate, how do these things called words, sounds, what do they do that influences the images and, you know, the movements, like study some of that, study a little bit about the originatory status, like where did all this come from, and when you read it from a lot of what we've spoken about today, you would not read it as a person, you would read it as a consciousness becoming self-conscious. You would be interested in the deep story of the human. I remember the first questions that I was asking when I was observing all these energy bodies. And then when I would find the right material, it's like, wow, you know, this is the same. This is like what people are experiencing. And what we know now as a human, it's like, wow, you know. So I never really read the books the same way as I used to. And I used to read a lot when I was younger, but I realized I didn't know how to read. It's the energy that taught me how to read. So when you go back to reading, you train your mind and your body to slow down the vibration, and you know, you deserve that. I know that we crave for that as well, to go back into the refined way you can hold the layers and the structures together. So yeah, put time there. It could be 10 minutes. When I spend time in music whilst I'm reading and studying, I make sure I spend at least like an hour in the music, or 30 minutes, or you know, it doesn't seem like much, but when I add to it within a week and then a month, it's like I learned really small itty bitty things that I know would be part of like a larger itty bitty thing that then would be part of a larger itty bitty thing. So what Inner Dance gives you is a kind of map on how consciousness works, that allows you to arrive at a theory of how the world works. Like how do things work? Like you know, how do things change? What is the nature of things in myself, and how do I orient myself as an energy being and as a material being? Those would be really key as well. And so when you do have the opportunity to hold a space for others, you would naturally find yourself sharing these amazing things to others, and they would be really, really grateful, because they know that you spent the energy, you spent time really constructing yourself slowly, which is what, you know, integration means. You know, you can feel when someone's integrated and when someone is still kind of discombobulated and is still kind of young and energetically not stable. You don't want to keep judging that, but on your part, do you deserve to not just like to vibrate and shake around and move stuff around, but to stabilize? So philosophy is the key. It's the key to that. When you look at something like Wikipedia, it's so amazing that we have this compendium of knowledge. But what the founders of Wikipedia didn't realize is when they created it, years later, people realized that 90% of all links through several degrees of separation lead to one page out of the maybe hundreds of millions of pages that now exist in Wikipedia. 90% eventually lead to one page, and it's philosophy. So there's something in the human that's interested in wisdom, like what is wisdom? What does it mean to be wise? How does wisdom work? So I'm not talking about going to Wikipedia and reading hundreds of millions of pages. I'm talking about the inner Wikipedia that's kind of interested in its own, you know, encyclopedic knowledge. Like energy isn't always philosophy, and a lot of energy work happening in the world is actually canceling out the mind. So if certain guides are telling you do not think for yourself, it's not really going to help you or others. The beginning of wisdom is the beginning of critical thinking, and the beginning of it grants independence. You know, like religion, old religion didn't grant independence, it granted dependency and reliance on outer systems. Independence is the greatest gift you can ever give anyone. And without wisdom, there could be so much love, but without actual wisdom, there's no independence. You're not letting people stand up and walk in their own feet as responsible, integrated, whole beings. So yeah, you want to give freedom, but you also want to give wisdom. So when you hold the space as a wise old being, they too will remember they're wise. So let's close. We went over the mark. No, we started late, so we're exactly 3 hours. Thank you, everyone. So if you could let me say good night, good morning, good day to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys next week. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.